Welcome to Behind the Author Brand, a limited series where we take a behind-the-scenes look at what it's like to be an author these days. Join me for meaningful conversations about exactly how real authors navigate their careers, marketing, branding, promotion, community building, and so much more. I'm your host, author brand strategist and expert, and also writer, Andrea Guevara. Thanks so much for joining us. Today's guest is Bridget Crocker. Bridget and I met a few years back when she joined my author branding program. Back then, she was preparing to begin pitching agents for her debut memoir. This conversation was recorded a couple months after her memoir published in June 2025. If you enjoy this conversation and you'd like to hear more about her earlier experiences of her publication journey, you can also watch Bridget's case study, the first one I ever recorded with a client, to hear more specifics about how she prepared for pitching and submission of her memoir. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this conversation about her book launch, the many years it took to bring this book to life, and so much other good stuff. Thanks for joining. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here, Bridget. This has been a long time coming. I know we meant to talk in advance of your book launch, and then you had your book launch, and it was crazy.
Yes, it was a very robust launch.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm so glad that we found time now to do it.
Me too. This is so fun because you were the first person I ever did a case study with. And now we're like full circle. The book's been published. We get to talk about that whole process, which I think is going to be really exciting and informative for people. Bridget is the author of The River's Daughter, which is a debut memoir about, well, actually, why don't you give us the elevator pitch for it?
Elevator pitch? Yeah, it's a coming of age memoir about growing up next to the Snake River in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and developing a very special relationship with the river to escape, poverty and abuse and trauma that was happening in my upbringing. And then parlaying that relationship with the snake into a career as an international river guide, where the river led me out of my home life, and I was able to learn from traveling, different points of view. I went to the other end of the world to get away from my family, and then there we were in all of, the situations I found myself in. And then, the river brought me back to my family, and we were able to work together and overcome the cycles of poverty and abuse to heal our family line.
Amazing. It's such a good book. I remember when we first met, you were just getting ready to pitch agents. You wanted to get your website ready before you were pitching agents. And then I was like, hey, wait, we need to give you a whole brand. We need to get you. It's not just your website. Yeah, sorry. But this has been such a long process. I mean, you wrote this book for 22 years, worked on it, edited it, making it what it needed to be. You have been working so hard. You put together your brand. You did do your website. You put together this really cohesive personal brand for yourself. You were able to get your amazing agent and your book deal and all these things. And now your memoir, I'm going to read off this incredible list of honors that it has already, even though it's been out for a short period of time. It was named an Indie Next Pick, a Goodreads Most Anticipated Book of Summer, Zibby Summer Read Pick, Library Reads Notable Nonfiction Pick, Amazon Editor's Pick for Best Biographies and Memoirs, and Town and Country Must Read Books of the Summer. So first of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
I mean,
yeah,
dude.
it's crazy to think it's 2 months old. The book is still a newborn. It's 2 months old, and so much has happened in just since the launch.
Yeah. So, the first thing I have to ask is just how does it feel to hold the book in your hands after 22 years of? It's brand new, but it's not. You've been gestating this for a long
Yeah.
time.
Well, it's interesting because let's start here. Here's one of the journals that I kept when I was younger, that has a lot of the stories in it. So, I've been holding this, and then it became, this sort of cumbersome manuscript. I've got a binder of it. So, I've been holding it like that. And then, I held the galley. Got a galley here.
Yeah.
See, here's a galley. Then it came like this, and this was, I mean, this was a big deal when it came like this. It was funny though, because when I got it, I had gathered my family around, and my husband just kept looking at it. He's like, I thought it would be a hardback. Like, this is a galley, it's an advanced reader copy. Um, but so, this was like an almost there, very close. And then when it arrived in the hardback, the quality of it. And this is why I targeted Spiegel and Grau, my publisher, because the quality of the books that they put out is extraordinary. And when I held this in my hand, what you don't see is that the cover is textured. It's like super thick paper, and it's
Yeah.
textured, and it feels like, you can feel the texture of the water. And just this feeling, of holding this beautifully, and then it's got like photo of me in it,
Yeah.
just all the things. And it's so much work to get a book to this stage, where you're just, but like, I'm used to working hard. And so it was always like, okay, I'm just putting my head down, and I'm working, and I'm like turning the things in, submitting, editing, back and
Yeah.
forth. And then it's like, okay, we're there, and here it is. I think it was really kind of shocking and hard for me to get my head around, like, I'm not gonna be working on this book day and night anymore, because it was such a habit after 22 years, like, every spare moment, I'm thinking about it
Yeah.
and working on it, and it was this voice in my head all the time, like, "You should be working on your book. What are you doing? You can't be, just enjoying," like, and then when it was over, that voice was still there, and that habit
Right.
was still there, but then I didn't have to do it. So then kind of switching gears of, I'm not having to do that anymore. And now I kind of just like took that productivity and like work ethic and put it into like, okay, now we're promoting, we're marketing, we're doing all these other things. And now kind of the big slew of that's over. And now it's sort of, figuring out where to put that energy. Um, and I'm excited about the things that are on the horizon for that. But
Yeah.
it's sort of like it's the book's there and the energy's there. And like I just showed you, from the journal to the binder to the galley to the finished product, like it just transforms. It takes different shapes, but the
Mm.
story remains kind of the same.
That's so interesting to think about. That's true. I think for probably a lot of people who will end up watching or listening to this, if they're working on a memoir, I think it takes a lot of us a long time. I mean, I'm working on a memoir that I've been working on for over 10 years as well. And it is partially because the story doesn't change, but your perspective changes. And the more healing that you do, and the more, I don't know, life things that come in and give you different insights and different ways to push forward, I feel like there's a lot of fear around, I got to get this done. Um, you know, am I going to miss my opportunity? And don't ignore that voice. Like, if you really feel like this is the time that you need to be putting it out, but that's a different voice inside you than the fear voice. And I'm a big believer that things happen in the timing that they're meant to. Like, this timing of this book, it took you 22 years, but like, what a beautiful moment. Who knows if it had been published, let's say in 2020 when everything was falling apart, would it have had this attention?
Well,
Or,
yeah, I wouldn't have had
you
a
know?
24 event book tour. I have several friends who had COVID books, and they're sort of clinging on, my tour, like, what, how is it? And kind of living vicariously because they didn't get any events, or their
Yeah.
events were all online, and they feel kind of robbed that they didn't get that. So I am super grateful that, yeah, everything is happening in its own time, and I have certainly fell victim to the feeling of like it's, I'm blowing it, I'm not working fast enough or hard enough, and I had this thing happen where I had a friend who's, he said you should send it to my sister. She's a agent, and kind of this was like 10 or 15 years ago. It was a while ago, and it was like in the fourth draft, and this is the ninth draft of the book. So at draft four, I was like, okay, and I had this opportunity and I sent it to her, and, she wrote back and said, we were really on the fence with this. I had four readers reading it, and ultimately we decided it has a tone issue. And so it needs more work. And I remember being so angry and devastated with myself that like, oh, I blew that opportunity with that agent, like there's just one. Um,
Right,
it's,
right.
but I was naive and I didn't know like there's as many literary agents out there as there are real estate agents to sell your house, and if one doesn't work out, guess what? There's a whole bunch more. And what was amazing with that opportunity was like her note, she gave me all her notes from the book, where the issues were. And so she showed me where the cracks were with the manuscript, and I was able to go back and address that. And I don't think that I could have, I couldn't see it myself, like self
Yeah,
can't see self. Like you work on it for so long, you can't there's a point where it's like you just can't edit yourself anymore. You have
for
to have
sure.
those outside influences. And she was an amazing, insider, publishing insider expert, and was able to really give me some solid, great advice. And that was the role that she was meant to play in
Yeah,
in the journey. And so I think part of it is seeing like not having expectations of like this person's going to do this for me, and just really surrendering to the journey of like these people are going to come in to help you at certain junctures, and it
yeah.
might look different than what you think it's going to look like.
I think that's such a good point. This industry can be very black and white, and this is the way you do it. And if you don't have this or you don't have that, you're not going to get, an agent, or you're not going to get a deal. And um, there's a lot of negativity.
And a lot of like rules or that you think are rules. And I am from a very young age not a rule follower. So I was like, okay, I never I
You're like,
never listened
whatever.
to the rules or people. I know, and I was just like my big thing is like, "Okay, you might be right." And then in my mind, I'm thinking like, "But you're not." And then I just kind of go on and do my own thing that I wanna do anyway. It's funny because I have one daughter who's exactly the same way. My father was the same way too. It's a totally genetic trait that we have. Um, and so I don't, I'm pretty defiant like that. Where I don't follow rules, and I don't really think they apply to me a lot of times either.
Yeah.
Just in
I,
in the limiting way. I mean, there's certain rules that do
of
apply, but
course.
like in a way that's. I mean, I'm not like super entitled. Like the rules don't apply to me, but just
Right.
in self-limiting ways where people are like, well, you can't. I remember,
Can't
like
do
for example,
this.
in
Yeah.
college, like I got an English degree that came with a teaching credential, and I was like, "I don't want the credential." And they're like, "But it comes with the degree." And I'm like, "I don't care. I'm not gonna be a teacher." And they're like, "Well, you need something to fall back on." I'm like, "No, I'm going to be a writer." And they're like, "Well, not everyone can be a writer." I'm like, "But I will be." I mean, I was just like delusional about like, this is what's gonna happen. And they were like, "No, but it comes with the you might as well take it." I'm like, "I don't want it. I don't wanna have anything to fall back on. You don't get it. Like, this is my path."
So it's so funny because I do think that like a lot of people struggle with that. That's an unusual trait that you have. I don't know many people, and I mean that in a positive way. I don't mean that you're
My husband
unusual.
thinks the same thing.
I mean,
It's not always a plus.
but I mean, I think in a lot of ways, in especially with things like this, it is. And actually, I was going to ask you this question a little bit later, but this kind of leads into this question, which is, uh, you've been a river guide in countries where I think a lot of women wouldn't even think to go on their own, um, let alone be a river guide with a bunch of dudes, like Zambia, Ethiopia, India. You've been a travel writer, and now you are this author of this really successful memoir. And each one of those things in and of themselves is something that like most people don't achieve. It's really hard to be a travel writer. It's really hard to be a river guide. You know, it's really hard to write a memoir and then also have it do well. And I'm curious, you have this ability to have this confidence in yourself and say F it to the rules. But what advice would you have for writers who maybe that doesn't come naturally to, or and that have this seemingly impossible dream that they're trying to fulfill?
If you don't have it, you need to cultivate it. I guess that's my advice. And,
Yeah.
in that same way that like people would ask me, well, you're not going to get the teaching credential. What are you going to do? Or people would say like, what's your plan? What, after college, what are you going to do? I'm like, I'm going to be a travel writer. And like, oh, wow, that's really difficult. Like you can't make a career out of being a travel writer. And I'd be like, okay, well, watch this. And I think like that kind of comes like, I talked about it in my book a little bit where when I was younger, there was a girl in my class who was loved to remind me and say repeatedly to me, you're trailer park trash and you're never going to be anything. And that just stuck in my head like as kind of this thing I was always pushing off of like, really watch this, that defiance. And I was going to prove her wrong. And I just, yeah, it's, and also like really being clear and knowing what my path was. I've always had a very clear vision of like what I wanted to do with my life and what my path was, and not veering from that, even though it seems delusional to everyone around me, even though I had to work like r- a slew of jobs to make it happen. I'm like waiting tables, I'm cleaning motel rooms, I'm working in cafes, I'm doing all of these, work cleaning people's houses, whatever, like just whatever to keep the dream alive. And people would be like, why don't you just like get a real job? And I finally did get a job working at Patagonia for 19 years.
Yeah.
It was just something I was not willing to give up on ever. I don't know. And just not, I'm not a great listener. So when people would tell me like that you can't be a travel writer or like that's very difficult, I just didn't think that applied to me. Like they told me that in college. People told me that afterward, people in the business, I'd go to these conferences or whatever, and they'd say like, not everyone here is going to make it. And in my mind, I'd be like, yeah, but I am. It was always like this kind of delusional, like,
Yeah.
um, belief that it was going to happen to me or I was going to die trying, that was,
Yeah.
it was just not, there was not another option.
I'm really curious about, like, I didn't plan on going this direction, but I'm so curious because I know we've talked about this before, and I am someone who had the opposite. Like, if someone told me I couldn't do something, I'd be like, oh, okay, well, I got to figure out, a way around it. And I also have the rule breaker mentality. So I would be like, oh, well, I can't do it that way. I'll figure out another way. But I didn't have the faith in myself. That was something I had to learn to cultivate, that like, well, I'm just going to make
Yeah.
it or die
So
trying.
here's my secret weapon. It
Yeah.
wasn't necessarily a faith in myself. It was a faith in my ability to build solid relationships with people.
Mm,
That is my unshakable faith.
yes.
I had a mentor, Judy Fairchild, wonderful, wonderful woman. She was the mom of two river guides that I worked with, and they kind of adopted me, that family. And she used to always say to me, like, she would just observe that I had this amazing network of relationships. And she would always say to me, your wealth is in your relationships. Because I'd be crying, like, I'm broke, I'm scrubbing toilets, I'm, piecing together this barely making rent existence. And she would say, don't worry about it. Your wealth is in your relationships. And I was like, she's right. I have a huge network of relationships and of friendships and people, I've collaborated with and colleagues. And I'm very good at keeping in touch with people. at maintaining the relationships. And I think that comes from coming from a family where I felt like I didn't belong. And so I was always kind of like trying to outsource, a family and belonging, and very resourceful in that way.
Yeah.
And that is my unshakable faith, is that like I'm going to meet somebody somewhere. They're out there. I'm going to meet somebody, and then, they're going to be like, "Oh, you should send it to my sister. She's a literary agent."
Right.
And I just have this unshakable belief that those things are going to happen, and that they're always happening, and that they're always available to all of us. So it's not like, "Oh, I'm going to like muscle this thing." So I'm glad you asked that question, because it is a distinction.
Yeah.
Um, it's an unshakable belief in my ability to connect with other people, to pursue this dream that I have, that the lily pads are going to appear. And I don't know from where, I don't know who it is, but I know that they're going to be there.
It also sounds like there's a faith in, or I guess like even rewinding a little bit, there's a moment where when you know what you want, there's like an alignment there,
Yes, like
and
when
there's a
I
faith
first
in
saw
that.
author branding, I was scrolling along and I saw this class that you were offering, this author branding class, and my entire body said yes. It was this feeling of yes, that's what I need. That's it. And when I have that feeling, then, and it was, like I had to talk to my husband, and it was a bit out of our range financially, but I was like, this is the thing. And he was like, really? Like, yeah, no, this is the lily pad we need to get to the next step
Yeah.
of going to market. Like, I have no idea how I'm going to get from here to here, but I know this class is going to be able to teach me how to get from here to here. And he was like, all right. And so we did it. And it was, that whole body yes was following that intuition has always served me very well.
Yeah. I love that. That's such an important part of the journey, is paying attention, even to specifically, like you mentioned, how your body feels about something. Because when
Yeah. And
you
now that
can't
I've had a
sort it out
few
up here,
whole body yes experiences where, and I listen to it and I follow it, and then the result is like amazing, astronomical. Now
right.
I know how to identify that feeling, right? When it happens, I'm like, oh, it's happening. I have to follow that, and so that becomes a muscle that gets stronger, and just like intuition, it becomes more reliable. And I mean, not that it was never unreliable, it's always been reliable. Every time I've had the whole body yes, amazing
It's
things
always more amazing
transpire.
than you, yeah, could have even imagined. It's the whether or not you listen to it,
Yeah,
right?
often it's inconvenient, or it's expensive, or there's a lot of excuses that can get in the way of you and your whole body yes. But if you can just have faith, like the things are going to happen to conspire to come together for you to be able to follow that path. And it's just going to take maybe some time or a little work or finagling, um, but staying true on course. Staying true to that
Yeah,
that course that you've set out for yourself.
I love that. Um, I am gonna skip to another question. We're going all over, like, off the rails in order of questions that we discussed, but
Love off the rails.
um,
It's my favorite place to be.
um, because I want to talk about that in terms of something that people don't talk about a lot. There's so much focus in the writing industry about getting an agent, getting a book deal, and then maybe like the marketing when the book is out. But there's this whole period, which is sometimes 2 years, sometimes even longer, between when you get the book deal and it comes out. And a lot can happen in that time period. I mean, first of all, you've got the professional edits. You've got maybe legal looking at things, especially with a memoir. You've got cover design. You've got book description. You've got your bio that goes in, and maybe your headshots and a bazillion other things. So we talk about that a lot in branding because we want you to be able to preserve your vision throughout and protect it and not have it get lost in that publishing process where it often does. Often publishing teams are working on, 30, 40, 50 books at a time, and they may not remember the initial magic of your book in the same way when it gets to publication. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how you protected your vision for your book through that process. Maybe just a few touch points of what you felt were like moments where you, I don't know, had to fight for something that you really wanted, or I don't know. You tell us what you want to talk about.
Yeah, no, there's a couple. Well, first of all, you talked about this in the branding class of how, like, when you can control your brand from the beginning, often it'll just follow through and you won't have to fight for things because it's already like done and people don't, why reinvent the wheel? Oh, this is already done. We already have a bio. So I just want to point out my bio is like pretty much taken from my website. It's exactly the same bio that's on my
Love it.
website. So they were like, great, we love it. They just throw it in there. Um, they did change the book jacket a little bit, and there were a couple of words that I didn't agree with that I was like, I'm really uncomfortable with using that word. Had some like adjectives to describe my parents that I didn't like. I really tried to avoid in my book, I just try to use our story as an example, and I didn't try to tell the reader like, here's what you should think about it. So there were just things like that. I think the main thing was the cover. The cover, which is it's amazing. Well, when they first sent it to me, they sent like a couple, and this was the most compelling one. The other ones were a little bit static, and I didn't love them. But this one, when it first showed up, this raft, it was a gray tandem inflatable sea kayak with a dude, a client, life jacket, and a sea kayaking paddle, a solo in a tandem sea kayak. Okay. And so initially I fell to the floor in my kitchen crying, like, oh my God, I can't possibly live with this. And then I was looking at it and I was like, okay, let's just look at what's working. I love the font. It's my favorite color. I love how that looks. I love the atmospheric water behind. So really it's just the boat. The boat is wrong because like it's the river's daughter. It's not like the, the
The
dude.
dude in the boat.
That's um, so I was like, that was the email I sent back. Like, I love the atmospheric energy of it. I love the font. The boat needs some work. It's, it needs to be a raft and it needs to be a woman in the raft because it's the river's daughter. So there was they were like, oh yeah, of course. So send us some photos. So I send some photos and it comes back and it's a raft, but she doesn't have oars. She has two paddles. And so she's like with the paddles, and it's a woman, and she's got these two paddles. And so that's not really authentic to the river world. And that's the other thing. Like, it's very important to me as a river guiding professional for, my entire adult life. Like, I have a community that I'm, you know, responsible to. And I didn't, you can't have like the boat be inauthentic. Like, that's the first thing. And that was very concerning for me. I was like, no, it needs to be oars. And like, here's how the oars are attached with this frame. So it was like a back and forth, like 4 times we went back and forth. And finally we got to it. But I felt like I was being a pain in the ass. I was being as nice as I could, but I was just not going to let go of that because it couldn't be inauthentic. It was like counter to my entire brand. Like, my brand is built on my authenticity as a river guide. And the first thing you see on the book is like an inauthentic river boat raft.
Right.
That's, mm-mm.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because I think this is a common thing. They are not in the river guide industry. They're designing something from the perspective of what's going to sell and whatever. And designers are great, but sometimes they do need this specific guidance too of, this is what is authentic to this thing. That is common. I've seen that a lot. And I think it's important to, obviously be respectful, but still push back with those things so that it
Right.
is.
And as an artist myself, like, I hope I never get to the place where it's like, I don't take notes,
So let's talk a little bit. I don't want to get like too lost in it because I know we could have like an entire hour long or multiple hour long conversation about book launch itself. But I do want to ask you about what it was like for you now that you're literally 2 months out. But I mean, that is what a lot of people don't realize. That is kind of the window. Like it ramps up maybe a month or two before the book comes out, and then it usually the heavy duty part of the book launch happens, a month or two after the book launch, and then it kind of peters out. So tell us what it was like.
So, the book launched June 3rd. So the first event I did was in February. And I went to Winter Institute, which is a convention of all the booksellers in North America and some from overseas. And that's where all the publishers present their list. It's like a sales meeting. You're meeting with all of the sales reps and you're showing them your products for the upcoming season, and you're trying to sell your products to them so that, they're going to carry them in their shop. And here's what was crazy to me. There were thousands of people there. It was in Denver at the convention center, thousands of booksellers. And there was a galley room where you just put all the galleys, and it was vast. It was, you go there. It really struck me how difficult it is because there's so many books, so many titles. You can't hold it all in your mind. You have no idea. So you have to really set yourself apart, and make yourself memorable from the beginning. So I'm going to show you what I did. Because
I love
I'm a
this.
hustler. I can't help it. Um, I I made these cards. I made just went to Staples and got like 2,000 cards, right? And I had a bag and I had them in my purse. And everyone I would meet, I would be talking to them and having a conversation. And just, my wealth is in my relationships. I'm here to build relationships. I'm here to make connections. And not in a gross way of like I'm, networking, but in a way of like I'm really good at making friends. So I'm just making friends with people. And so after we would have our conversation, I would hand them my card, and I was like, I want to give you my card here, and it has, see, my book cover next to my face. And I would hand it to them like this. And then I would say, and then my info is on the other side. And so when they get back home and this is sitting on their desk, they're going to be like, oh yeah, I remember her. Oh yeah, that's her book. So and I passed out thousands of these. And so that's right at Winter Institute was when those folks that I met, they immediately started calling my publicist and saying, we want to have her at an event, and we want to buy her, we're going to buy her book and we're going to have it in our shop. We're going to sell it. That was the first thing. And then it became, so then you're just going to see what a dork I am. I'm revealing all my dorkiness right now. So then my publicist was like, what we're hoping is that you want to meet enough of these folks, these booksellers at Winter Institute, that this is who decides the Indie Next pick, right? So they vote. It's the booksellers themselves. They vote. So then and there's this thing at Winter Institute where all the authors are there with their galleys, and you're signing your galley. They come to your table and you sign galleys for them. So everyone that came to my table and they're signing my galley, I would chat with them and I would ask them for their card. Like, can I get your card? Okay, here they all are. Can I get your card? And they're like, oh yeah, here. And I give them a card again, because I have 2,000. So I would put it in the galley, my card in the galley, and I would get their card. So now I have their cards. I have their address. Okay. When I got home, because, I was taught as a kid to write thank you cards, I would send them this card. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure meeting you at Winter Institute. If the book moves you, I would love if you could recommend it for Indie Next. And I look forward to seeing you, putting together an event and seeing you this summer. Guess who got nominated for Indie Next?
This girl.
A bunch of, yeah. And so,
yeah,
your wealth is in your relationships.
Yeah.
I just want to keep repeating that. And I was in here for a week writing little thank you notes. And then guess who's going to send one of these to each of her conversation partners and the 24 bookstores that hosted an event. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
I loved talking with you and look forward to seeing you again. Maybe
Yeah.
for the paperback tour. But you have to keep these relationships going. I mean, that's the key that people don't understand is people want to help you. They're friends, so
Absolutely.
you make friends with people.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because relationships are a huge key to any career, but I think especially in publishing. And I taught a class, I think it was last year. It was building your author network, and this is reminding me. I can't remember what month I have slated to teach it, but it's so important. Like it's literally the reason I have a career in this industry. And what I like that you highlighted is it's about the relationship. It's not about the cool guerrilla marketing tactic. Like, yes,
I'm using
you
those
use it
tactics.
too.
I read that book, I have
Right.
the whole series and I read them, but it feels like so like salesy to me in a
Yes.
weird way. And that's never been my way of marketing or branding or selling myself.
Yeah.
It's always been more of this authentic relationship. So I'd like take the tools, like, have the card, have the thing, but use it in this way that feels more comfortable to me of like, I'm just making friends and staying in touch with
Exactly.
them. And I've done that for a long time. Like I send out a Christmas or holiday card to all of my editors every year, which is also dorky. But one time, uh, the editor of Trail Runner magazine called me in January and said, "Hey, I was just sitting here and I was looking at your card on my desk and I was thinking like we should have her do a story for us about trail running in California." And then that led to like I wrote for them all the time. That was one of my regular bread and butter um, gigs that
Yeah.
I had a great relationship with that editor and anything that I would pitch him, he'd be like, "Yeah, we love it." But that
Yeah.
was because I sent a holiday card every year.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to highlight the approach on that, again, it's not a transactional thing for you. And people can sense when it is. When we see people who give us cards at events and we can tell that they're just like schlepping their wares, we can all tell on a gut level and we're
Right.
like, ugh.
Yeah, you
But
don't
we
want to
could,
be gross about it. Yeah.
when we feel like it's a real human trying to relate with us, it's a whole different story.
And
I love that.
I ask if I can give them my card. Can I give you my card? And they're always after the conversation like, "Yes. Oh, yes, I love that." It's not like I'm laying this whole trip on them and holding them hostage. I mean, we've all been there where you feel like somebody's holding you hostage in the conversation because they want something from you. And I'm getting that a lot lately. Now when I'm at the events or even now people emailing me like, "Can you introduce me to your agent?" I'm like, "Who are you?" And they're like, "Google me." I'm like, "Why do I want to Google? I don't know you. We don't have a relationship." So I
Right.
don't want it. I'm not interested really in going out of my way to do something for you if we don't even have a relationship. And I think
Exactly.
a
It
lot of
goes
people
both
are
ways.
missing that key piece of information of like, you build relationships because then you have this network that you can it's a give and a take. It's, relationship. You're in relation to each other. It's not like I'm gonna, demand that you do this thing for me and you're gonna do it. That's like hostage situation.
Yeah, no one wants that.
Nobody wants that. Don't be that person.
And I think that's the thing too, that people just, if you don't want to be that way, just do a gut check. You will know if you're doing something that feels inappropriate, if you pay attention again to how your body
Everybody
feels.
does know though. That's what,
I know, maybe not.
I mean, we
Maybe
think
I'm
that.
being too nice.
Well, and there's a neurodivergent element too. A lot of people
That's
don't have
true.
that component. So that's why I like showing like here are the things and some people do need
That's
a
true.
little extra coaching when it comes to like how to build social relationships. Like the social cue isn't
This
quite
is
as
true.
strong for them. Yeah, I'm super blessed in that I have that ability. It's always been a
Right.
natural talent that, my dad was a salesperson, very talented,
Yep.
very, very authentic, and I watched him a lot. And so one thing that is helpful, if this is something, this sounds like it might be you, listening to like How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, and just that's a great way to start learning like how do you build relationships. And there's a lot of self-help
Yeah.
books that help with that are kind of in the sales area.
Right.
Yeah. Wayne Dyer, Zig Ziglar, my dad had this whole library. I listened to all of them. But so that's, we all listen to like memoir writing or like
Yeah.
writing podcasts, like maybe branch out a little bit and listen to building relationships and sales and business podcasts too.
It's so true because, I mean, let's be honest, there's a lot of trash advice and terrible tactics in marketing and sales and advertising. But there is a lot of good stuff too. And I think the baby gets thrown out with the bathwater a lot. And I get it because most people don't want to be that salesy, cringy person. And they feel like they have to be in order to sell or market themselves. And you don't have to be. And I think that's a really
You
important
take what you
distinction.
like and leave the rest. Like I took the tools, I took
Yep.
the tools, but I use them in a different way that feels okay to me. Um, and I think that's the thing. Like like you said, you just you don't do it hook, line, and sinker, but you just take what you like and leave the rest.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So speaking about the book launch period, and I love that you told us that kind of behind the scenes story because a lot of people don't hear about those sales meetings. They just hear about like the front loaded marketing stuff.
Yeah. Well, so
Um,
after I did the Winter Institute, that was February. Then there was like 4 months or more of setting up podcasts and pitching. Even before the sales meeting, I was already pitching essays and pitching stories because these things are decided way in advance. You don't want to like show up, the month before your book launches and be like, hey, are you interested in a story? Because like they're already all set, people have their schedules way in advance.
yeah.
Editorial things run a year to 6 months in advance. So you should be pitching a year to 6 months in advance of your book launch or whatever it is that you want publicized. Um, so I was writing all these articles and, doing 1 and 2 podcasts a day, recording and, every day, like this was my job. And on top of, like, no, the boat needs to be, a raft. So like there's it was a full-time job. You get up and you do all of that every day. And then, uh, my publicist and my publisher, they were putting together my book tour, and, that's very involved with all the logistics and where are you going to stay and where are you going to fly out of and what are the dates and, it's like putting on a wedding 24 times. There's so many. Yeah, who do you know that you can be a conversation partner? Um, just so many different things pieces of the puzzle to put together. So that's a big back and forth all the time. And I'm on the phone or emailing with my publicist and that team, and also marketing things, all these different collaborations. So you're trying to put together all these, as many as you can. It's like go, and you just like go out there and you try to, and again, guess what comes into play during that? All your relationships come into play. This is the theme of this. And and they ask you, like, both my agent and my publisher, they had an author questionnaire form that I had to fill out right in the beginning. And they're like, who do you know? Basically, like, who do you know that has a podcast? Who do you know who's an author that could give you a blurb for your book? Because you have to hustle for a blurb too. You have to ask all these people, and that it was excruciating. But luckily, I had some people that I could ask for blurbs, and I got some beautiful blurbs from Tim Cahill, wrote an early blurb, and Tracy Ross wrote an early blurb that I sent out to publishers with my manuscript initially. And I knew both of them. I'd built relationships with them, 10, 15 years, standing relationships with those two. And then Norman Alstad. I had a friend we have a mutual friend. And so, I was like, hey, could you introduce me to Norman Alstad? I'd love to get a blurb from him. And then my publisher, they pull out all their contacts too. And you know, you just see what sticks. So then that's, so you're planting all these seeds. You're just out there and you're planting. And then, okay, it's time to go on tour now, the launch. So the tour is like every day I'm in a different city and I'm getting up at 4 a.m. and getting on a plane and flying to a new city and then meeting with a local reporter for the local magazine or the local newspaper, and then meeting with the news people, like the radio station at NPR or wherever, and doing a podcast interview with them, and then going to the event and doing the event, and then, maybe going out afterwards with folks. And because all these people that I've built relationships with my entire life are showing up at the events, like from 40 years ago or whatever. So I've got all these folks, and so it's just this very intense period of like seeing people you haven't seen forever. And I have to say that at almost every one of my events, somebody from high school that I grew up with in Jackson was at one of my events, which was so special to me. And they were always weeping. They were always crying because they were so happy that I survived, number one, because they'd witnessed me going through all of these things that I talk about in the book. And they were worried about me and nobody knew what to do to help me. So they're so like happy that I'm alive and I'm okay. And so proud that I've now, turned lemons into lemonade, and so then, of course we have to go out afterwards. So then I'm out till like 11 or whatever, and then get up at 4 a.m. the next day and like go on tour. So, and this is for 6 weeks. That's what happened for 6 weeks. And then all of these articles that I've written are coming out. And so I'm trying to post about all of the articles. And we were talking earlier, it was like, oh, I had this piece in People magazine. You're like, you did? I didn't know that. And so it was
No idea.
I'm like, Anna, here's a People magazine article. Oh, and I did this thing for Lit Hub. Oh, and I have another event coming up next week. Like it was, the pace was crazy of all these things happening for 6 weeks, nonstop. And then there's new things, because then like the goal is to create as much buzz as possible, in the launch. And so you want everything that's what my publicist kept saying, was we want everything to come as close to launch date as possible. But what happens is like you have an explosion of zucchinis, and you can't harvest all the zucchinis.
So true.
Like giving your zucchinis away. Like there's so many zucchinis. It was just, the garden was just exploding. So now I'm like, okay, maybe let's circle back to some of these things that, like, on a normal day, me having a piece in People magazine would have been like, I'd be talking about that for a month on social media. Like, look at it, here's my article. Here it is again. And, but it was just this blip in my stories, where I wasn't even on anybody's radar really. And then like there's new things now coming through. Now I'm into like I just got offered to go to the Miami Book Fair yesterday, which I'm like, yes, please. That's amazing. And then I'm teaching on the faculty at the Jackson Hole Writers Conference in October. So I guess like fall I've been told, should move into fall. It's more the writers conferences and things like that. We're moving into the next phase of gardening. But also, still like getting the word out there about the book and writing the thank you cards. Don't forget about that, thanking people along the way for helping you get to where you are. It's so important.
Yeah, it is. That's awesome. I want to take a moment for anybody who's listening to or watching to just acknowledge that I know not a lot of authors have this kind of support in their book launch. So if you are someone who has had a book launch that was not as exciting and, full of good opportunities, we get that. Like, there's no perfect formula. If there was, then a lot more authors would have these wonderful experiences. But not to discount also the work that Bridget's done to lead to this point as well. It's a mixture of preparation and luck and all the good things. But
Well,
I
and
also just want to, go ahead.
on that note, it's just that Teddy Roosevelt quote, like, do what you can where you are with what you have. And if you're doing that, like we were talking earlier, one of my Spiegel and Grau authors that launched also the same month that I did is Bruce Halsinger in Culpability, and his book was chosen to be Oprah's July pick. Beautiful book, great book. Was there a twinge of like, I wish my book had been picked, Yes, that's a natural instinct. And so I think jealousy is a natural instinct. It's like a little bit of sibling rivalry. But I immediately was like, no, here's a guy who's worked hard. He deserves this. And it's a great book, and be happy for him, you can always lean into, I mean, you have a choice in those moments. I could be like all bitter and totally discount all the amazing, beautiful things that are happening. But you got to stay focused on what you have and work with what you have where you are, and focus on the good things and the beautiful things. And then more of that comes in, and it's a choice we all have.
Totally. I think and that's a good point too. It's very common for there to be a writer who has more than one book out. Their first book didn't hit it big, but maybe their second did, or maybe their fifth or whatever. To just keep going, because if you don't get the most amazing experience the first time, it is not an indicator of what's, going to happen next.
Absolutely. Yeah. Don't give up. Like, cause it didn't, like you didn't get chosen for Oprah's book pick the out of the gate.
Yeah.
Or you
Yeah.
didn't get,
Which is
the dream
extremely hard
publisher or the dream
to
agent
get.
out of the gate. It is hard. It's hard because it's disappointing. We all have these dreams and visions of what we want, but often the universe has a different path for us. And like I think that's a big part of my success is, when there are these disappointments, when I've had them, when there are rejections, and I have had plenty of rejections. And my thing is like, no isn't a no, it's a not yet. Every time I hear no, I turn it in my mind to a not yet. And you just got to keep going and not give up. And that's the hard part, because it's discouraging. It can be discouraging. And that's what's awesome about building communities like this, is that we can be discouraged together and get uplifted and get inspired, to get back out there. And, you just got to pick yourself up and get back out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's where, coming kind of full circle back around what we were talking about earlier, that's where that quote unquote delusional belief
Delulu, as my kids say.
comes
Mom,
in.
it's a
Yeah,
Delulu.
exactly. Like, you got to be a little delulu in faith in either yourself or your idea or like whatever this vision is. Because, coming up, like going to writing classes, inevitably, I'm sure you've seen this happen too, where like there'd be people who are clearly good writers, and they'd say, oh, I just have always wanted to be a writer, and people have told me my whole life I'm such a good writer, and blah, blah, blah. And I was always like, I want that. Why did no one tell me I was a good writer who's going to be a famous writer, And like, I realized some people, maybe that's good for, and maybe we all want that, but like the thing that people can't take away or circumstances can't take away is a belief in what you're doing, to the point where you're not going to give up no matter what other people think.
Yeah. And I think that's, there's a line in my book where my dad says to me, uh, like, I'm worried about the family. And I said, don't worry, we have a strong family. And he says, you know who's the strongest? And he pointed at me, and I said, well, that's because I got my ass kicked the most. And he's like, true story. Yes. But, every time I get my ass kicked, it makes me stronger. Like
Yeah.
you talk about teachers saying, oh, you're an amazing writer. You're going to be a professional writer. Like, I had a professor, the best professor I ever had. She gave me a D in her class, and I never got a D in my life. And I went to in office hours, and I was like, what the, why are you giving me a D? Like, I saw the girl next to me got a B, and I know her paper wasn't half as good as mine. And she was like, I know you've just skated along getting A's this whole time, and no one's ever said anything to you. And I'm going to grade you based on what I think you can do. And so I like, for the first time in my life, had to work my ass off to get, a B. I think I got a B plus in her class. Um, and I was so mad, but like that was what I needed. I needed somebody to challenge me, to raise, the
Yeah.
bar for me, because I had just kind of skated along, and, I knew what the formula was, and I would just knock that out. And um it wasn't a coddling. It wasn't like, oh, you're a great writer. It was like, I know you're not living up to your potential. And so I'm gonna kick your ass a little bit and get you there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the universe does that to us. I know it does it to me for sure. Like, hey,
Yeah,
lady.
and that's the preparation that we need to get to where we're going. And so, uh, we hear it all the time, but it's true. Like, the setbacks are the opportunities.
Yeah, they are. And it's okay. Like in the moment, you may not feel like that and process the emotions, like let the anger or the fear or the grief,
And
whatever
it's really easy
out.
to veer into the self-pity, and to veer into the disappointment, and veer into the jealousy. And those are the moments where you've really got to dig deep and be like, no, bring it back to gratitude, for where I'm at.
Yeah.
And where's immediately, like, and it's a training. You have to train yourself, like, to immediately look for the opportunity,
Yes.
when there's a setback, and immediately, look for, okay, this is not what I can't do. What can I do?
Yeah. It's interesting too because a while back I read this book called Burnout. Um, and they were talking about how naturally with our nervous systems, we're meant to feel an emotion and then go through the process of releasing it. So the analogy was like, if a lion is chasing you, you feel all this fear and your adrenaline's pumping, whatever, and you run, right? And then you get away from the lion, and then there's an immediate moment of, okay, I'm safe. And so the cycle completes. And so if you are feeling jealousy, anger, whatever, like these things, you've got to complete the cycle. And it's really interesting because if you just indulge it, a lot of times it releases in a few minutes because it just needed to complete. And a lot of times when we keep like circling around a negative thought, it's because we're not processing it. We're just like holding it and nurturing it. And so it's like, if you can get rid of that, if you can shed it, if you can just like work through it, you don't want to ignore it. Obviously, that's toxic, but it's amazing how fast you can work through things if you address it in the moment. And then boom, okay, what can I learn from this? You know, maybe everything doesn't have to happen for a reason. I don't think it's always like, this rosy thing, but you can always learn something, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And I love the saying, like, it's not happening to me, it's happening for me. To switch that,
Yeah.
when it's like, "Oh, why does this always happen to me?" If you can still like, okay, it's not happening to me, it's happening for me, because there's a lesson in here for me to learn. And what's the lesson? Like, immediately look for that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to just ask you one final question. You mentioned that this book, you wrote it as an act of devotion to your younger self. Can you tell us a little bit about more about what that means to you?
Yeah. As somebody who grew up in a dysfunctional family culture, with there's a lot of gaslighting and denial. And so I started writing this as a kind of a way to just keep track of myself, in journaling. Th- I would say, like, oh, remember when we did this or that? And my mom would be like, that never happened. We never did that. And I was like, am I losing my mind? I thought we did that. And then so I started writing things down so I could go back and look, and like, no, no, here it is. We did do that. That did happen. Um, And so it was, it began, that was the first act of devotion of, like, the allegiance to my own memory and my own
Mhm.
sense of reality. Um, And, as I got healthier, and this happens, with people who are cycle breakers, as you get healthier, like the system fights and wants to keep you, everything shifts. Like the healthier you get, the louder the system gets. And we see that like politically, right? In our world right now, like the more we resist it and we're like, no, and we're breaking the cycle, like the louder things get. It's like the clamor of the last breath or whatever. I really wanted to continue to honor myself and like I have here on my desk, here's a picture of little Bridget, fourth
Oh
grader, and just look at like, just always laughing and kind of a little bit devious and a little bit defiant. Um, and then I have this one. Somebody just gave this to me on book tour. They showed up and they had all these old pictures. And this is me backpacking in the Eastern Highlands in Chimanimani in Zimbabwe. We did this backpacking trip and we ran out of food and and I hadn't eaten in like 4 days or something. And here I am. And this is the border with Mozambique. And so there are all these landmines right behind me.
my gosh.
And I'm just like, here we are, just doing the thing. Landmines, be damned. Um, so I've always had this like spirit of adventure and this daring do and this like desire to um, really like an enthusiasm for fun to, and growing up in a system where there was, you know, there was some fun for sure, but there was also a lot of like having to just go underground to survive. You know, this book was about like letting that girl not have to be underground. That girl who is adventurous and is just really devoted to having fun and laughing and you know being a part of a community, because when you're stuck in that cycle of being in the dysfunction, those things are sacrificed. Community, um being able to have fun, being lighthearted. uh that's one of the things I love to say is like, learning how to be lighthearted anyway, even when sad, disappointing things are happening, like to learn how to have fun and be lighthearted anyway. And I think that's been like the one of the biggest things. And what's successful about the book is that there's some like heavy stuff in here, right? There's some the whole first act is pretty rough. But then you get through that and you see my character learning how to um overcome, those things, but like maintain my sense of adventure and my sense of fun, and my sense of humor, using one-liners and humor as a defense mechanism. So yeah, it was an act of devotion of like, no, this is who I am, and I'm standing firm in that, and I'm celebrating that, and also showing how do you stay connected to that part of you, even when there are forces working against you at every turn.
It's beautiful. I think there are so many women, especially right now, looking for that reconnection with themselves and a return to who they really are and finding the joy in their lives again.
And that's why I started doing these women's adventure wellness retreats, because there are
Yeah.
so many women who are just needing that encouragement and just a safe place to be, and with other women, and creating a sisterhood, and having fun in nature and connecting with nature, reconnecting with yourself and journaling and um, just creating that space to come not have to be underground anymore, because I feel like there's so many of us who are forced underground just for survival's sake, and we don't have to live like that, even in the darkest circumstances. And that was my whole mission in writing this book, was that to show even in the darkest circumstances, you don't have to live like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so glad you brought up the river guide trips because retreats, because I was literally just like, oh my gosh, we didn't talk about it yet. Can you just tell us a little bit about what that is? Because I think that's such
Yeah.
an amazing thing that you're doing.
Oh, it's so fun. I'm a guide at heart, and I'm always going to be a guide. And in my writing, I'm a guide too. That's what I do is interpret and encourage. And so I started these retreats with a friend of mine, and she's also a river guide and also amazingly wonderful and encouraging. She's an Ayurveda practitioner, and I do bring in writing and journaling and kind of reconnecting with self. And we developed this curriculum that just is amazing. It's just this catalyst. And it's really helpful for a lot of people that come, women that come on our retreats are kind of at a transition spot, like they're getting out of a marriage, or their kids have just gone to college, or they're going through a major life transition, and they're really wanting to reconnect with who they are and kind of chart a path going forward of how they want to show up in their lives. And because I'm a river guide, the trips happen on rivers, and we have one coming up in February on the Pequare River in Costa Rica, which is a river I worked on for a while, and I lived in Costa Rica for a while too, working on that river, and it's one of my favorite places. It's just there's just so much love on that river. People I talk about personalities of different rivers in my book, and the Pequare is a place that just exudes love. And I always feel just my heart opening when I'm there. And it's a perfect place to reconnect with love and with yourself. We also do zip line tours there. Like so it's kind of we do a lot of different things. There's zip lining, there's like river tubing, there's a waterfall hike, there's beautiful, hummingbird butterfly garden. And what's cool, we stay at this eco lodge right on the river, and you paddle in, and we stay at the lodge for a few days and do all these different kind of side activities and do also the curriculum, and there's yoga. And we also this year are going to have a body worker there, which is amazing. Yeah, so all these things are optional too. So some people are like, "Yeah, I want to raft, but I'm not really like into the zip lining." And you can sit out anything, and you can even sit out the rafting. But the lodge is amazing. It's right on the river, and the creek comes through, and it's just this phenomenal place. In one of the most biodiverse places in Costa Rica, because the guy Rafael Gallo is one of the pioneers of rafting in Costa Rica, and he really did an amazing job with conservation work and protecting the Pequare River. So there's jaguar, there's toucans, there's blue morpho butterflies, ocelots. I mean, it's gorgeous, beautiful spot with hot showers and beds. My friend and I also do one on the Salmon River that's a little more rustic camping on the river. We didn't do it this year because of my book tour, but we plan to get back to that. Yeah. So, and what's been incredible is that we've just built this amazing sisterhood.
It's amazing.
It is amazing. And
I'm
anybody
gonna
who's
go on one
interested
of
can,
these.
yeah, you can just go on my website, and there's the retreats section, and you can just get more info through the website.
Yeah, definitely. And what is the website, Bridget?
It's just my name, bridgetcrocker.com. And you can get a book there
Um,
too. You can buy a book.
yeah,
You can look at different videos. I've got a bunch of videos loaded up of interviews, lots of different interviews, and previous works. You can see my People magazine piece there is linked.
yeah. Oh, you know what we talked about this a little bit earlier, the piece that you wrote about the music behind the book.
Well, yeah, Large Hearted Boy. I did this really fun piece for Large Hearted Boy, and it's they asked me to write something in like no word count, which was amazing. I stayed under 2,000 words though, but it's stories that like behind the scenes stories that inspired me during writing of the book.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and then there's it links to a Spotify playlist with those songs. They're super eclectic, so it's kind of a funny Spotify mix. But, I also have a Spotify mix of all the songs that appear in the book because there's so many music references in the book that we created a Spotify for that. But this is a different list of books in Large Hearted Boy essay, different list of songs that I had playing all the time when I was writing certain chapters or that really informed the art and the work.
That's great.
And
I
that
think it's really
there's a link to that on my website too.
okay, good. I was gonna ask. Yeah, I think it's really
it can be helpful for other writers too to just hear like, oh, okay, what was her process? How can maybe this will help with my process, or just the
Yeah.
fun of the music too. But
Yeah. Yeah. I had a lot of fun with that assignment.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for talking with me today and for being
Always a
here
pleasure
and
to be here
sharing.
with you. Yeah, thank you for the work that you do to help people realize their dreams. I mean, it's so important. You inspire people to be, to show up for themselves. And like, what's more important than that? To show up for your dream. And it's easy to get discouraged, but we need to keep building communities like this and talking about it. And I appreciate so much what you're doing for our community.
Thank you. Likewise. And next time we're going to have to talk. We didn't even get into nature, which is shocking for us. So we're going to have to just have like a nature show
Yeah,
next
okay,
time.
we'll do that.
All right.
Great.
Have a great day. Thanks for being
Yes, you
here.
too. Thank you for having me. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.